Hi boys and girls. I wanted to do a quick tutorial with you over the three areas that we are going to be covering on the test tomorrow. A lot of this is going to sound very repetitive, but certainly the more you hear something, the better you understand it. So I'm going to shake things up a little bit, and instead of starting with mitosis like we did today and on the review, I'm going to start with the digestive system. So the most important thing in the digestive system is understanding how everything is connected. So the first place that food goes is into the mouth, and that is chemical and mechanical digestion. Chemical because saliva is added, which breaks down the nutrients, and then the teeth chew the food, which is mechanical digestion by making the molecules smaller or making the food smaller. So then, it goes into the mouth and down the esophagus, okay? Yes, obviously the tongue is involved, the epiglottis is the flap that covers the trachea, but we're going to talk about that when we get to the respiratory system. So for now, we're talking about the esophagus, and remember the esophagus is a muscle that has like ring-like muscles on it. And the way that food goes down the esophagus is through a process called peristalsis. Remember, peristalsis is not an organ, it is a process, okay? So if I say, I had one class, I think it was third period, that every time I said peristalsis, you were supposed to do the wave. Maybe it was second period, I forget. But remember, it is a wave-like contraction, okay? A wave-like contraction that pushes that food down the esophagus and into the stomach. In the stomach, there is hydrochloric acid and pepsin. Hydrochloric acid breaks down the food, and pepsin neutralizes that acid so that it won't burn a hole in your stomach. And that breaks down the food even further. Also, remember that your stomach is a J-shaped muscular pouch. Here's the J, by the way, in case you're wondering how that's a J. A muscular pouch, so that muscle churns the food, it squishes it up, moves it around. So that's why you also have mechanical and chemical digestion going on in the mouth at the same time. No, in the stomach, sorry. In the stomach at the same time, okay? So now all your food's in the stomach, and it is going to go from the stomach to the small intestine, okay? So in the small intestine, you have villi, which are just like these little finger-like structures that look like the loops on a towel, and that is where all the absorption takes place in the villi, so that it's just like I said, just like the threads in a towel, and those threads absorb the water. In this case, these villi absorb the nutrients. So an important thing to remember about the small intestine is that most of the chemical digestion takes place in the small intestine, and that's very important to remember because of the nutrients that are absorbed in the small intestine. We could technically starve to death if we ate but had no way to absorb the nutrients. So small intestine is the largest amount of chemical digestion that takes place. Now, peristalsis is actually involved in moving that food through the small intestine as well. Remember, your small intestine is approximately 20 feet long. So unless you wanted to hop back and forth and stand on your head to move that food through all of those curves, you have to have some way to push it down, and that is peristalsis again. Then it goes into the large intestine. And the large intestine, we're not doing the appendix. The large intestine absorbs water, absorbs excess water, and also the bacteria in the large intestine makes vitamin K, also known as potassium. So it goes into the the large intestine, where all the water is absorbed and it becomes a solid again. Then the feces is stored in the rectum. Feces is what grown-ups call poop. I don't know. I guess I'm a grown-up and I say poop anyway. But it is stored in the rectum, and then it is released through the anus, right here. So again, it is stored in the rectum, released in the anus. And remember, anus is a sphincter, which is just a muscular hole, a muscle hole. That sounds kind of funny, but so that is where your food travels. Now notice my pen marks aren't on the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. That is because your food does not travel through those areas. The liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder are helper organs. So be sure that you understand that they are helper organs, okay? Let's see, let me write this down, hang on. Helper organs. So the pancreas makes digestive enzymes, specifically one that is most common is insulin, or one that you've probably heard of the most is insulin. So that first one is the pancreas. Okay, the second one is the liver, and that is that big thing right there. And when we dissect the frog and we open up the cavity, the body cavity of the frog, the very first thing you'll see is the liver. It's huge. So the liver makes bile, and it also filters nutrients once those nutrients are absorbed from the small intestine. So what happens is the nutrients are absorbed into the blood from the small intestine, which is then filtered through the liver. So when we talked about how somebody who doesn't make good lifestyle choices, whether there's a lot of drinking and drugs, that can have a negative effect on your liver, because your liver is going to try to filter out those bad things, those toxins. And what's going to happen is, just like when you pour something through a colander or some sort of a sieve or a strainer, the stuff that's left behind stays in the strainer. So just like the liver, the stuff that is left behind in the liver that's not good stays in the liver. And obviously that can have negative effects. So the liver makes bile and filters nutrients, and then the gallbladder stores bile. Remember, the definition of bladder is something that holds something else. So there's a bladder in a soccer ball, there's a bladder in a basketball, because it holds air. In this case, the gallbladder holds or stores bile until your body needs it. Now remember, bile is responsible for breaking down fats. So if you have your gallbladder removed, you will have to decrease the amount of fats that you have in your diet, because your body will not have a reserve of bile to break down the fats. Your liver will continue to make bile, but your gallbladder will not be there to store it. So if you have that giant container of French fries, your liver isn't making bile fast enough to break down that fat, and you are going to have a very upset stomach. So let's see, make sure we covered all of the digestive system. We have the parts: the mouth, esophagus, to the stomach, to the small intestine, to the large intestine, rectum, and anus. Helper organs are gallbladder, pancreas, and liver. There's villi inside the small intestine that absorbs the nutrients. Peristalsis is responsible for moving the food down the esophagus and through the intestines. Let's see. I'm looking at the diagram here, and maybe you guys are watching this video yelling something that I've forgotten. I'll look back through the review, but I think I covered everything. All right, so that's it for the digestive system. And I will be adding another quick video on biomolecules and mitosis.